The federal government requires you to submit 1099 forms for certain types of vendors. This often applies to independent contractors and companies other than corporations. You must mail these by January 31st following the close of the calendar year. Accounts Payable allows you to track vendor payments for the purpose of printing the 1099 miscellaneous, 1099 dividend, and 1099 interest forms. You can code your vendor in vendor maintenance for the appropriate form and identify their taxpayer ID as well as their default box number and if the box 9 should be selected. When entering an invoice, you can apply the invoice to one of the 3 types of 1099 forms. You can also specify the appropriate box number on the 1099 form to record the invoice amount. For each vendor, 1099 payment history is recorded for all 3 forms and for all appropriate boxes. The entry at the default 1099 calendar year field in Accounts Payable Options tracks current year payment amounts reported on 1099 forms and distinguishes them from payments for the current year. The 1099 calendar year is tracked separately from the current Accounts Payable fiscal year. This allows your accounting period to be on a fiscal year basis versus a calendar year. It also allows you to perform period-end processing or year-end processing for accounts payable independently from Form 1099 printing. Realize that when a 1099 is created, the amount is based on the check date, so that's the payment, not the invoice date. You'll want to verify that the 1099 year is correct under Accounts Payable Setup Accounts Payable Options. The 1099 uses the vendor address, not the remit to address. You can run vendor listing with balances, or payment history report, or view vendor maintenance or vendor inquiry to verify the amount paid to 1099 vendors, as well as the appropriate boxes being selected. You'll run your 1099s through the Reports folder, 1099 Tax Reporting, and you can run them multiple times. You will still need the red Form 1099 and 1096. After you run your 1099s, 1099 history will be purged based on the number of years that you've selected to retain 1099 payment history in Accounts Payable Options. After you print your 1099s, you will have the option to increment the 1099 calendar year. If you do not do this, it will not increment, and the next year when you run 1099s, you'll need to verify your 1099 calendar year is accurate. This year will never automatically be incremented by closing your accounts payable fiscal period. So each vendor that you need to have receive a 1099 needs to be coded appropriately. And that's on the Additional tab, and you'll be able to identify the type of business, the default form, their taxpayer ID, the default box, whether you need to check miscellaneous box 9, if they've allowed you to electronically send the form, and if it's a foreign that you need to identify. From here, you can also look at the 1099 history, and this is one place that you can look to verify the information that would be on the 1099. Now, if a vendor happens to get different forms, the information will be stored based on the form type and the box on the invoice and when the payment is made. So we can see for this vendor we have $1,835. Now another place that we can look at information is the vendor listing with balances. And this you can sort in a number of different ways. You're probably familiar with this report. I can identify be the end of the year, but also what I can do is limit to only look at 1099 vendors. And if I only wanted to look at a particular vendor, I could do that as well. So let's look at the vendor that we just looked at. Now you'll need to scroll down, and you're looking for the payments for the current year. And in fact, this vendor only had one check that was paid to them, but I can see the payment amount. So this actually matched what we saw in vendor maintenance. Another report we can run is the payment history report. This report can be run by period or by date. Let's say I look at the whole year, and let's choose that same vendor again. and I can verify that payment. Now sometimes you may have vendors that weren't coded appropriately for 1099 before all the payments. In that case, you would just go to the vendor maintenance and you can modify it. So if you happen to have coded the wrong box, or you didn't know which box to code, or there were payments missing, this is the place that the information would be pulled for, and you want to make sure that it's correct. So once you've verified that everything is correct, you'll go to the Reports menu and you'll go to Form 1099 Tax Reporting. Now you have to have a Sage Business Care plan in order to do this, and an active internet connection, but I can show you what this looks like in the demo mode. When you pull up the 1099 tax reporting, you can see that it defaults to doing a new form. If you were needing to reprint, you could go from history. It also defaults to a dividend. In this case, I want to look at miscellaneous forms. I can also isolate and filter my vendor types either on individuals or businesses. I can see my 1099 calendar year. I can see the company information coming in. That pulls automatically from vendor maintenance. And again, let's just pull that one vendor that we've been looking at. This tool also lets you update your forms, download updates. We're going to go ahead and continue expired. We could also cancel. Now, because of our demo data and because of the date, we do have some different warnings here. And this is good because the system will make sure that you've got the appropriate forms. And if you don't, you could go back and download them. You can see that it says company information will be stored and used only for 1099s, and that it comes from company setup. You can make additional updates by going in and editing company setup. At this point, it brings us to the starting point of the setup wizard. Kind of says, well, you haven't processed any 1099s. Do you want to do any of the following? So you can actually demo this with only a limited number. If you have a lot of 1099s that you cut, you may want to go through this and just look at the first 25. You can look at all of them, or you can just start processing. It'll bring in your taxpayer ID. This comes from company maintenance. I see my payer information, so if I needed to change anything here, if I want to put a contact, I can go ahead and do that. This would not write back to company maintenance. You would have to do that. And you can see if there is a required field, you'll get some messaging from the system. Asks you what type of filer you are. Lets you go ahead and add any state or local items. If you have any recipients who elect to receive only electronic 1099s, is this your final return? Again, verifying that data. As far as your ID numbers, what do you want to do as far as truncating them and displaying them? And then kind of asks you if you have multiple companies, what you want to do. Since we are in the demo mode, we can see that nothing is being transmitted. And now we go through to verify all of the various information. Again, I only pulled one vendor here, so we're just seeing one vendor. We can see the information that will be populating. There's also help available within here in the upper right hand corner. So looking at the taxpayer ID, then to check the FEIN, if it is an FEIN, which it is, rather than a social security number. When you want to check the check if FEIN checkbox, verify that. I can verify names and addresses, verify all income boxes, verify the filing state, verify the amount of state income and withheld if appropriate, verify other information, and then I come where I can complete my 1099 e-filing service. Gives you those various options of letting the system print and file for you, and I could also do an archive of the PDF. I only have one state in here that this vendor was attached to. If I had multiple states, we would see those and select the states that we wanted to file. And then you can review your information of what you're going to be producing. You can see here now this is my California 1099 miscellaneous because this vendor was in California, so I can go ahead and print it. And then there's 5 reports here, so we're just stepping through those different reports. You got 1099s, you got 1096s, and then you can put in your username and password for the test drive and receive a sample confirmation to see what kind of information you'll get back from the system after you've filed. And then from here, I could actually set up my e-file account if I do not have one. Here's that field that says, do you want to increment the default 1099 tax year? So until you're ready actually to default that, you would not want to. So I'm going to say no, but what that would do would be, again, in Accounts Payable Setup, on the main tab, it would increment the default 1099 calendar year.